Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Mark Prater podcast, where our aim is to connect our global family of Sovereign Grace churches with our executive director. Mark, those who are in Sovereign Grace know that we have 7 shared values that we prioritize and celebrate and cherish. One of those is complementarian leadership in the church and in the home. And anybody with one eye and half a brain who's observing the current state of our culture knows that we are swimming against the cultural tide as we stand firm in our convictions. And because you wanted to serve us, you wanted to highlight a resource to help us as we hold fast to our biblical convictions. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a resource that is published by the Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, a journal they put out. It's called Icon, a Greek word, and the subtitle, A Journal for Biblical Anthropology. So if you are a pastor listening to or reading this podcast or a member of one of our churches, I would encourage you to subscribe to this journal. You can get that electronically, or I tend to prefer to get it in print form, so it's available in that way as well. And I just started reading the most recent edition, which is the spring 2023 edition. I wanted to highlight it because I think it's a timely and important resource for pastors in Sovereign Grace and members of our churches in Sovereign Grace. And this particular edition of the journal is unique because it is devoted to a chapter by chapter review of the book Discovering Biblical Equality, the third edition. And that particular resource, Discovering Biblical Equality, is one written essentially by egalitarian authors. And it's important that in writing about the complementarian egalitarian debate, you're beginning to see in the egalitarian camp just a shift towards embracing, for example, LGBTQ ideology. So let me just read a portion of the introduction to sort of hopefully provoke you to get this journal and read it. This is what they say. Our reviews reveal that this third edition marks a significant departure from previous iterations of the intra-evangelical debate between complementarians and egalitarians. While most of the book is refreshed and repackaged arguments for egalitarianism, some chapters have given up significant ground to LGBTQ ideology, including an embrace of personhood theory, the use of gender-neutral pronouns for God, and preferred pronouns for our neighbors, suggestions of feminine names for God, the promotion of side B gay Christianity and same-sex covenanted partnerships, or marriage light, as it's been called by critics. And most alarming of all, a chapter entails an endorsement of transgender ideology, including so-called gender reassignment surgery. So I think it's an important journal or edition for pastors in Sovereign Grace to read. And again, I would encourage members of our churches to read, because it's not just about the complementarian egalitarian debate. It's how the egalitarian theology or doctrine is really shifting even more towards the culture and embracing an unbiblical anthropology, to put it, from a theological sense. And that means embracing things like LGBTQ ideology. So I think it will help pastors not only in the debate that's happening, but also just to be equipped and armed to answer questions from people that could come to our churches. Where do you stand on LGBTQ issues, for example? I think a good read of this journal will equip our guys to respond in a biblical way. So just an encouragement to read it.
Excellent. Definitely will be checking that out. Thanks for the recommendation. More broadly speaking now, in this area, what thoughts do you have for us throughout Sovereign Grace?
Well, I think it's important that we be mindful that theological shifts happen subtly. We have to keep our eye on God's word and make sure that we're not shifting from God's word. So let me just give you an example of one of the reviews that's written in this journal. It's written by Colin Smothers. I think he was the executive director of CBMW. And he says this, actually, what he's doing is he's reviewing a chapter written by Krista McKirkland. It's entitled Image of God and Divine Presence, A Critique of Gender Essentialism. That's the title of her chapter in Discovering Biblical Equality. So Colin Smothers does a review of that, and this is what he says. Perhaps the most radical chapter in the book, the one that I just mentioned, is significant for someone to read. In her chapter, McKirkland not only rejects gender essentialism, but she also uses the gender-neutral pronoun God self in place of masculine pronouns to refer to God. She also uses masculine pronouns to refer to a biological woman, and even refers to this woman as a Christian, despite the individual's embrace of transgender identity. Most troubling, McKirkland opens the door for people to undergo so-called gender reassignment surgery, provided they pursue it in submission to the Spirit in order to become more like Christ. So there's what you hear there is biblical language. We want to be led by the Spirit. We want to be more like Christ, but to embrace an unbiblical identity is not to become more like Christ. And so it's a real bit of an illustration of how things shift somewhat subtly. And if we're not careful, we can be influenced by the culture that we might think, oh, that I might have room for that in my theology. We can't have any room for that kind of thinking, obviously, in our theology, if we're going to remain in fidelity to the scriptures and orthodox in our theology. So again, just an encouragement for our guys, and again, any members of our churches to read this particular edition of the journal, the spring 2023 edition of Icon.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, in this world in which I saw recently, the number one song on Christian Apple Music was in part sung by a drag queen.
Oh my goodness.
In opposition to the church. I mean, that's the world that we're currently living in. So we do well as pastors to pay careful attention to our life and doctrine in this area, and even I think it's helpful to bring clarity to the church at times as well. We started using the Nashville Statement, for instance, also a CBMW thing. So grateful for them and the resources that they're providing to help us as pastors and as members of Sovereign Grace churches throughout the world. So thank you, Mark, for the recommendation. Thank you all for watching or reading. We'll see you here next week, Lord willing. Bye for now.
Thank you for watching. If you have questions or comments, Mark would love to hear from you. For more videos like this, hit subscribe on YouTube or by email at markkprater.com.